If you told me a year ago that our neighborhood's biggest celebrity would be a 25-pound swan with anger management issues, I'd have laughed in your face. But there was Brutus. Perched on the dock of the newly renamed Karen's Cove, the teens had petitioned the city, staring down a group of visiting reporters like a feathered bouncer deciding who made the guest list. The viral fame from the lake wars had transformed him from local nuisance to internet icon, complete with his own verified TikTok account, managed by Liam's little sister, because apparently swans can't operate phones, and a merch line that outsold Karen's memoir 3-1. The Brutus 2024, no HOAs, just hands, t-shirts were particularly popular, especially after someone photoshopped his face onto the Titanic poster with the caption, "I'm the king of the dock." But Brutus' real power move came when the city council, jumping on the PR bandwagon, declared our lake a satirical landmark to honor its role in highlighting the absurdities of modern governance. The dedication plaque featured Brutus' scowling mug and a quote from Big Sal's mom. "Sometimes, the best leaders are the ones who bite first and ask questions never." Of course, fame came with complications. Tourists kept trying to sneak selfies with Brutus, only to flee screaming when he'd inevitably charge. His angry goose impression had gotten more dramatic with practice. The wildlife department issued a "Don't feed the celebrity swan" notice after someone tried to bribe him with organic kale, which he promptly threw into the lake like the trash it was. And when a reality show offered to film Keeping Up with the Waterfall, the HOA had to hold an emergency vote on whether animal stars violated community dignity clauses. The result? A 62-3 decision that basically said Brutus does what he wants. But the real full-circle moment came on the one-year anniversary of Karen's departure. We threw a Karen's Not Here festival, live music, legal fireworks, and a dunk tank where you could sink a Karen lookalike, all proceeds going to the teen center. Halfway through the party, Brutus waddled up to the old HOA office turn museum, stared at Karen's nameplate in its glass case, and did something nobody expected. He nuzzled it. Just once. Then immediately bit Derek's shoelace like nothing happened. The crowd lost it. Was it forgiveness? A warning? Or just a bird realizing his arch-nemesis was truly gone? We'll never know. But the mural painted that night on the teen center wall, Brutus wearing a world's best ex-HOA president sash, says everything we need to. Final finale twist. The geothermal company installed a bronze swan statue by the new dock. Its plaque reads, "In memory of all the Karens we've loved, to outsmart." Every Friday, someone ties a different ridiculous hat to it. The first Amazon review popped up at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, and by sunrise, the whole neighborhood had the screenshot saved to their cameras' rolls like some sort of digital war trophy. How to Lose a Suburb in 10 Days. One Woman's Fight Against Chaos, by Karen, last name redacted for legal reasons, had somehow made it to publication, a self-published, 237-page masterpiece of revisionist history that painted her as the tragic heroine of our lakeside saga. The cover photo alone was a work of art. Karen posed stoically by a generic body of water, definitely not our lake, unless she'd photoshopped out all the jet ski scars, her hands clasped around a gavel like it was the Holy Grail. The description promised an unflinching look at the collapse of community values, which translated to chapter after chapter of thinly veiled rants about entitled millennials, me, lawless livestock, Bessie the pig, and even a 3-page footnote about how the geothermal deal was clearly insider trading. But the piece de resistance? Chapter 11. The Teen Center Conspiracy, where she outright accused Liam of being a youth anarchist and claimed the graffiti wall was a front for Antifa recruitment. It was so unhinged, so gloriously Karen, that it rocketed to number 1 in the local government category before anyone could fact-check a single sentence. Naturally, we threw a book club meeting. Not just any book club, a live roast at the Karma compound, complete with a dramatic reading by Derek, who'd perfected Karen's signature screech, and a drinking game where you had to take a shot every time the word unreasonable appeared. Spoiler. Ambulances were not called, but only because we had a designated driver rotation. Halfway through Chapter 4, the day the music died and took common decency with it, Big Sal's mom stood up, adjusted her reading glasses, and dropped the mic we had known was hooked up to the center speakers. You know what's truly unreasonable? Charging $14.99 for this. The crowd lost it. Someone projected the page where Karen claimed the swan was a trained assault animal onto the exterior wall while teens reenacted it with pool noodles. Even the local news showed up, framing the event as a literary deconstruction, rather than the beautifully organized bullying it absolutely was. But here's where karma outdid herself. The backlash made the book more popular. Not with Karen's intended audience of discerning community leaders, but with exactly the people she'd tried to villainize. Memes of her most outrageous quotes flooded TikTok. Late-night hosts did monologue bits about HOA Karen and the very bad, no good year. And in the ultimate twist, a Real publisher offered to re-release it as satire. The updated cover? A cartoon Karen being chased by the swan with a cheeky blurb. The suburban horror story that will make you laugh, cry, and triple-check your property deeds. The HOA's official response? A unanimously passed motion to buy 50 copies as educational material for future boards. The demolition crew showed up at dawn, their sledgehammers swinging with the kind of poetic justice usually reserved for movie montages. The old HOA office, that beige eyesore of bureaucracy, where Karen had once doled out fines like some suburban dictator, was coming down to make way for something the neighborhood actually needed: a geothermal-powered teen center complete with a gaming lounge, recording studio, and most importantly, a no adults allowed policy. Watching that building crumble felt like watching the Berlin Wall fall. If the Berlin Wall had been made of cheap drywall and the shattered dreams of people who just wanted to park their boats without a citation. The whole block showed up to witness the spectacle, lawn chairs and all, as Big Sal's construction team, now local heroes after the geothermal windfall, carefully salvaged one singular item from the wreckage: Karen's engraved nameplate from the door. For the museum, Sal grinned, tossing it to me like a trophy. And by museum, he meant the glass case we'd installed in the teen center lobby, right next to the plaque listing all the ridiculous HOA violations we'd collectively endured over the years. Exhibit A, the Karen era, the label read. The kids loved it. But here's where the story gets really good. With the geothermal money flowing and the neighborhood finally united, we'd put the teen center plans to a resident vote, and the winning design came from none other than Liam, the dirt bike kid Karen had once tried to ban from the subdivision for excessive skateboard noise. His vision? A space where teens could be loud without apology, complete with soundproof music rooms, a graffiti art wall, supervised by an actual artist, because we're not complete anarchists, and a snack bar funded by the solar company's community reparations check. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when the ribbon-cutting ceremony featured Liam cutting the tape with Karen's own ceremonial scissors, recovered from her abandoned desk drawer, while his punk band blasted a very explicit cover of Another Brick in the Wall. The older residents winced. The teens lost their minds. And the local news ate it up, especially when interim HOA President Big Sal's mom announced the center's official name, the Karma Compound. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Brenda, Karen's former second-in-command, showed up to protest the unmonitored youth activities, clutching her pearls so tight I worried she'd choke herself. That's when 14-year-old Emily, the same one whose rabbit Karen had indirectly killed, handed her a clipboard and said, "Dead serious, you can volunteer to supervise the board game hour. We need mature perspectives." The way Brenda's face softened as she scribbled her name down was almost touching. Almost. The center's grand opening party looked like the world's most wholesome riot. Kids spray-painting murals legally, teens DJing on solar-powered speakers, and even Mr. Petrovich teaching chess in the quiet zone. As I looked around at the crowd, former enemies sharing picnic tables, Karen's worst nightmares thriving in the space where she'd once ruled, I realized something. We hadn't just won. We'd replaced her. Not with another tyrant, but with something far more dangerous. A community that actually liked each other. The dusty cardboard box labeled Lake Miscellaneous had been sitting in Granddaddy's tool shed for decades, buried under fishing nets and a suspiciously stained copy of Playboy's Guide to Bass Fishing. I only found it because Derek's dog knocked over a shelf during our post-victory barbecue, sending rusted hooks and yellowed paperwork flying. That's when the folded map fluttered out, a brittle, coffee-stained surveyor's document from 1962 with a circled section near the North Shore labeled Parcel G, undeveloped. At first, I thought it was just more useless bureaucracy, until my finger traced the boundary lines and landed on the shocking truth. That worthless patch of brambles and swampy ground the HOA had been using as an unofficial dump site for years? The one they'd just sold to a solar farm developer for peanuts without consulting residents?
Yeah.
Turns out Granddaddy had quietly held the mineral rights to that land separately from the lake deeds, a fact confirmed by a very awake Charlie the lawyer at 2:17 a.m. when I FaceTimed him with the discovery. "Holy shit, kid," he rasped, adjusting his reading glasses. "That's not just land. That's a gold mine dressed as a mosquito breeding ground." Because here's what the HOA didn't know, and what Karen would have screamed about if she'd stuck around. Parcel G sat atop something far more valuable than solar panel space. The state's new clean energy initiative had designated the entire region as a prime site for geothermal wells, underground heat vents that could power entire neighborhoods. And thanks to a quirk in 1960s property law, mineral rights trump surface rights every time. The developer's check for $15,000 suddenly looked like a bad joke compared to the six-figure offers that started pouring in from energy companies the moment I filed the mineral rights claim. But the real power move? Calling an emergency neighborhood meeting with proper 72-hour notice, "Thank you very much," and dropping the bombshell. They want to pay us, not the HOA, not some faceless corporation, but every single lake resident. Royalties for what's under that land. The silence was so complete you could hear a pin drop, followed by the sound of 40 homeowners simultaneously realizing they'd almost been swindled out of a small fortune. What happened next was like watching a superhero movie where the whole town bands together against the real villain. The HOA's shady backdoor deal with the solar company unraveled faster than a cheap sweater when residents demanded answers. Turns out, Karen had known about the geothermal potential, her cousin worked for the Energy Commission, and pushed the sale through before anyone could investigate. The developer threatened to sue until Big Sal's mom played her trump card. The meeting minutes where Karen had explicitly called Parcel G useless wetlands. The resulting settlement gave every household a stake in the geothermal project plus funding to finally repair the crumbling community dock. As for me, let's just say Granddaddy's junk box paid off my mortgage. The kicker? The energy company named their first drill site Karen's Revenge, a permanent middle finger etched into the bedrock. But the best revenge wasn't the money. It was seeing the neighborhood transform. No more petty violations, no more power trips, just a community that finally understood who the real enemy had been all along. At our first annual Parcel G Day festival, featuring geothermal-powered fireworks and a dunk tank shaped like a certain someone's face, even former Karen loyalists toasted to fresh starts. As for the HOA, they're too busy approving backyard chicken coops and painting murals to bother anyone. Just when I thought the war was over, when the for sale sign went up in Karen's lawn and the neighborhood collectively breathed a sigh of relief, the certified letter arrived. Thick legal parchment, embossed letterhead from a firm called Winthrop, Steele and Getting Rich, and enough legalese to make my eyes cross. At first, I thought it was a lawsuit. Maybe Karen was coming after me for emotional damages or some other nonsense, but then I saw the highlighted section. Per Article 12, Section 3 of the original 1953 land grant, all lakefront property owners must maintain reasonable and equitable access to communal waterways. My stomach dropped, because suddenly, Karen's last-ditch power play became crystal clear. She wasn't contesting my ownership of the lake. She was using it against me. The letter demanded I immediately dismantle the floating DJ booth, remove all private party apparatus from communal waters, and, this was the kicker, provide 72 hours notice for any gatherings exceeding 15 people so the HOA could ensure equitable shoreline access. It was brilliant in the most evil way possible. She'd found the one loophole in Granddaddy's ironclad deed, a vague clause about shared enjoyment, buried beneath all the clear ownership language, and weaponized it. The timing wasn't accidental either. With the new interim HOA board still finding its footing and the neighborhood still buzzing from the revolt, this was Karen's revenge, trapping me in bureaucratic red tape while she slipped away to her condo, leaving chaos in her wake. But here's what Karen didn't account for. I wasn't the only one with skin in this game anymore. The moment I posted the letter in the neighborhood Facebook group, caption, "Guess who's back?" the response was volcanic. Retired lawyer Mr. Petrovich dug up precedent cases about reasonable access, meaning actual navigation rights, not veto power over music volume. Stay-at-home mom and former paralegal Jessica discovered the clause had been written to prevent landowners from blockading the lake, not throwing parties. Even Big Sal's mom, the new HOA president, dropped the bureaucratic mic. The board has reviewed the demand and finds no merit. Carry on. But the real twist? Karen's own letter had inadvertently exposed an even juicier truth. The original land grant also required the HOA to maintain all access points and amenities for lakefront owners, including the parking lot they'd let crumble into potholed oblivion. The lawsuit I filed the next week, demanding they repave it with interest dating back to 2015, made the local paper's front page. Lake owner turns tables on HOA in legal smackdown. Karen's response? Radio silence. No court appearance, no counterclaim, just a sudden unavailability that coincided perfectly with her moving truck's arrival. Rumor has it she's in Florida now, terrorizing a new HOA with lessons learned from her defeat here. As for the lake, last weekend, we threw a D-Day party, complete with a life-sized ice sculpture of Granddaddy's original document and a sound system that definitely violated the old noise ordinances. The new board members showed up with beer and a plaque that read, "In recognition of services rendered in the Great Karen War." It hangs next to the framed cease and desist letter on my dock. But this story isn't quite over yet. Because hidden in all those legal documents was one final bombshell, a clause so unexpected, it's about to rewrite the entire neighborhood's future, and it all starts with a long-forgotten parcel of land everyone assumed was worthless. The HOA meeting notice arrived in my inbox with the ominous subject line, "Emergency Session Re. Lake Incident." But the real emergency was the sheer number of folding chairs the community center had to drag out from storage when over 100 residents showed up, a turnout usually reserved for zoning fights about Walmart supercenters. The air smelled like cheap coffee and barely contained revolution as I took my seat in the back, flanked by Derek, wearing a homemade Deeds Don't Lie t-shirt, and Mrs. Rodriguez, live tweeting the whole thing with the enthusiasm of a war correspondent. Karen, somehow still clinging to her clipboard like it was the nuclear codes, called the meeting to order with all the enthusiasm of a dentist announcing root canal day. "We're here to discuss the unacceptable violations of community standards this weekend," she began, her voice doing that shaky but trying to sound firm thing that bad school principals master. That's when Gary, beautiful, Corvette-driving Gary, stood up and dropped the mic nobody knew he was holding. "Actually, Karen, I think we're here to discuss why you lied about the parking lot ownership." The room erupted in a chorus of uhs, usually heard in middle school cafeterias. What followed was the most beautiful public unraveling since the finale of Game of Thrones, Season 8 doesn't count. One by one, residents Karen had bullied for years stood to air grievances like it was some demented suburban version of Festivus. Elderly Mr. Petrovich waved a stack of violation notices for his unsanctioned vegetable garden. Teenager Liam played security cam footage of Karen keying his dirt bike. It was blocking her sidewalk view. Even Brenda, formerly Karen's most loyal minion, tearfully confessed the HOA had been operating on selective enforcement for years. Through it all, Karen's face cycled through the 5 stages of grief at warp speed, landing squarely on bargaining when she suddenly remembered she had Robert's rules of order on her side. "Point of procedure," she shrieked, banging her gavel like it owed her money. "We need to vote on whether to." That's when the fire alarm went off. Now, I can't prove Derek snuck out to pull it, but the wink he gave me as we all evacuated was more telling than any confession. The parking lot became an impromptu town square, with clusters of residents plotting like they were storming the Winter Palace. The local news crew that showed up, tipped off by who else but Mrs. Rodriguez, captured the exact moment Karen realized she'd lost, when the board members huddled without her and emerged with a motion to table all pending violations pending review. The write-in ballot to remove her as president passed by 83%. The icing on the cake? The new interim president turned out to be none other than Big Sal's mom, a retired labor organizer who immediately proposed a Bill of Residence Rights. As Karen slunk to her car, parked illegally in a handicapped spot, naturally, someone again, no proof it was Derek, blasted "Hit the Road, Jack" from their Bluetooth speaker. The standing ovation that followed could have been heard clear across the lake. But here's what nobody knew yet. Karen had one last Hail Mary play, and it involved a surprise weapon. The very same lake deeds she'd tried to dismiss. Because buried in those documents was a clause even I hadn't noticed, one that was about to turn this suburban revolt into an all-out property war. By the time the last tow truck slunk away with its tail between its wheels, the entire showdown had already been immortalized in no less than 17 different phone angles, thanks to my foresight friends who understood that petty revenge tastes best when garnished with internet clout. Derek, the resident meme lord of our group, had spliced together footage of Karen's meltdown with the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme before the cops had even left the parking lot. But the real magic happened when Lake resident Mrs. Rodriguez, the sweet retired librarian who secretly ran a 500K follower TikTok account about HOA horror stories, posted her drone footage with the caption, "POV, when the HOA president forgets who actually OWNS the playground." The internet, being the beautiful dumpster fire that it is, took exactly 37 minutes to turn our local drama into the hashtag LakeWar 2023, complete with reaction memes comparing Karen to various dictators and my jet ski to the American flag at Iwo Jima. By midnight, my Instagram DMs looked like a newsroom during election season, local reporters, podcasters, even a producer from Judge Judy's spin-off show all clamoring for my side of the story. But the crown jewel? When the official Today Show Twitter account quote-tweeted Mrs. Rodriguez's video with, "This might be the most American feud since Hamilton versus Burr." Thoughts? Karen, of course, responded to her sudden internet infamy the way all cornered animals do, by doubling down. Her hastily filmed clarification video, shot in what was clearly her walk-in closet, backfired spectacularly when eagle-eyed viewers spotted the Community Leader of the Year plaque hanging crookedly behind her, an award we all knew she'd basically bought by donating ugly benches to the clubhouse. The comment section roasted her alive. "Nam, this is a Wendy's. Tell me you've never felt joy without telling me," and, my personal favorite, "if entitlement was an Olympic sport." Even better? The local news segment that aired the next morning featured aerial shots of our now legendary party juxtaposed with clips of Karen's infamous past HOA rulings, including the time she tried to ban solar lights because they disturbed the nocturnal ecosystem, made it harder to catch teenagers making out by the docks. The reporter's deadpan delivery of the line, attempts to contact Ms. Redacted for comment were unsuccessful, though neighbors report seeing a U-Haul parked outside her home this morning had me spitting out my coffee. But the real victory came when the HOA's own Facebook group, previously Karen's carefully curated propaganda machine, became ground zero for mutiny. Long-suffering residents came out of the woodwork with their own horror stories. The family fined for their kids, too colorful, bicycle, the elderly couple harassed about their excessive bird feeders, even the yoga instructor who got a violation for inappropriate outdoor stretching, still not sure what that meant. The final nail in Karen's digital coffin? When HOA board member Gary, yes, the same Corvette driving Gary from the parking lot, posted the simple but devastating comment, "Maybe we've been going about this all wrong." The likes on that single sentence outnumbered Karen's last birthday post by 20 to 1. Little did we know, this online uprising was about to translate into very real consequences at the next HOA meeting, an event that would soon be dubbed the Suburban Bastille Day by meme historians. The moment Karen's police backup failed, I knew she'd escalate. This was a woman who once called code enforcement over a garden gnome's lewd posture. After all, what I didn't expect was the sheer audacity of her next move. 2 tow trucks rolling into my parking lot before the cops had even left, their yellow lights flashing like some sad parade of pettiness. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, that smug, "I just invented the rules," smirk plastered across her face as the drivers started hooking up my friends' trucks. "Private property requires private parking permits," she announced loud enough for the whole lake to hear, waving a sheet of paper that looked suspiciously like it had been printed 5 minutes ago. "And since you've all been trespassing," that's when I burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but the kind of deep belly laugh that makes your ribs hurt, because Karen had just walked straight into the trap I didn't even know I'd set. See, Granddaddy's lawyer, a whiskey-drinking old shark named Charlie who kept deeds in his gun safe, had warned me about this exact scenario. The parking lot was technically leased to the HOA, with one beautiful clause buried on page 37. Lessee shall not impede lessor's right to grant temporary parking privileges for social gatherings of fewer than 50 vehicles. And guess what? I'd counted the cars twice, 48, including Derek's questionable El Camino. But the real chef's kiss? The lease also stated any unauthorized towing would incur a $500 per vehicle penalty payable to yours truly. I wish I'd filmed Karen's face when Officer Jenkins, now thoroughly done with this nonsense, read that part aloud from my copy. Her complexion cycled from sunburn red to sheet white faster than a traffic light. That can't be enforceable," she stammered, suddenly very interested in the fine print. Meanwhile, the tow truck drivers, sensing the legal tide turning, started unhooking the cars with the speed of men who'd rather not get sued. But the piece de resistance? When Big Sal, my 6 feet 5 inches, 300-pound cousin who ran the only legitimate towing service in the county, pulled up in his monster rig and parked it sideways across the lot exit. "Sorry, folks," he rumbled, cracking his knuckles loud enough to make Karen flinch. "No unauthorized vehicles leaving today." The standoff that followed was something out of a Western movie, Karen sputtering about jurisdiction, the HOA members whispering nervously, and the entire party now gathered on the grass, with popcorn-worthy anticipation. That's when I dropped the nuclear option, a brand-new parking privilege revocation notice for the HOA board members who'd approved this fiasco, effective immediately. Watching Karen realize she'd just stranded her own people was sweeter than the birthday cake waiting in my cooler. The final surrender came when HOA Treasurer Gary, whose Corvette was now blocked in, threw his hands up and yelled what everyone was thinking. "For God's sake, Karen, just apologize." The walk of shame back to her Lexus, conveniently exempt from the tow list, naturally, was the most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. But little did Karen know, this parking lot rebellion was about to spark a full-blown HOA civil war, one that would end with her gavel getting snatched right out of her perfectly manicured hands. The morning sun hadn't even finished burning off the lake fog when the first jet ski tore through the glassy water, its engine screaming like a banshee with a grudge. I'd spent months planning this birthday bash, 20 of my rowdiest friends, 3 industrial-sized coolers, and a floating DJ booth that was currently blasting "Baby Got Back" loud enough to shake the pine needles off the trees. But of course, the HOA's fun police had their binoculars trained on us before we'd even cracked the first beer. By 9:17 a.m., there she was, Board President Karen, yes, that's actually what her name tag said, storming down my dock like a khaki-clad hurricane, her clipboard clutched like a shield and her face twisted in the special kind of rage only middle-aged women with too much time on their hands can muster. "This is exactly why we have noise ordinances," she shrieked over the bass, jabbing a finger at the floating party like it was a war crime. I let the song finish, because disrespecting Sir Mix-a-Lot is where I draw the line, before killing the music and delivering the line I'd been practicing in the mirror for weeks. "Actually, Karen, you might want to check your bylaws." The way her face froze, like a Windows 98 computer trying to process a new virus, was almost beautiful. Because here's the thing her precious HOA handbook didn't mention. My granddaddy didn't just own the biggest property on this lake. He owned the mineral rights, the docking rights, and, this is the kicker, the parking lot their precious community patrol cars used every damn day. The deed was currently taped to my jet ski's dashboard, notarized and highlighted in obnoxious neon pink. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a carp's as I revved the engine. "Want to see it up close?" I yelled over the roar. "I'll do laps." That's when she pulled her phone out. That's when she called the cops. And that's when this little birthday party turned into the best damn reality show this zip code had ever seen. The cop car rolled up with lights flashing like we were running a meth lab instead of a margarita stand. Officer Jenkins, who'd already dealt with 3 of Karen's emergency calls this month, including the great mailbox flower pot incident of 23, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen practically tripped over herself to tattle, her voice hitting that special frequency only dogs and desperate HOA presidents can hear. They're violating noise ordinances, trespassing, and I'm pretty sure that floating speaker system violates maritime law. Jenkins sighed the sigh of a man who'd signed up to stop real crime and ended up as a glorified babysitter for grown adults. He asked for my ID. I handed him something better, Granddaddy's 1953 land grant, the updated property maps, and the parking lot lease agreement I'd found tucked between his fishing licenses and a Playboy from the Nixon administration. The way Jenkins' eyebrows shot up when he saw the documents should have been framed. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Karen with the tone of someone delivering really bad news. "Seems he's got the paperwork to back this up." Karen's face did this incredible thing where it cycled through shock, rage, and denial faster than a TikTok slideshow. "Those are fake," she screeched, pointing at the embossed seals like they'd personally offended her. That's when my buddy Derek started the chant, "Deeds don't lie. Deeds don't lie." And suddenly the whole lakeshore was echoing it, even old man Henderson from Unit 12, who usually hated everything louder than a whisper. Jenkins shut it down with a glare, but not before I caught the smirk he hid behind his ticket pad. Karen looked like she might actually combust right there on the dock. And me? I fired up the jet skis again, because nothing says happy birthday like watching a control freak's worldview crumble in real time. But here's what Karen didn't know yet. This was just the opening act. Because while she'd been busy calling the cops, she'd forgotten one crucial detail. That community parking lot her minions loved to patrol. The one where they'd been slapping warning stickers on any car parked crooked? Yeah. That was about to become ground zero for the sweetest revenge this side of the Mississippi.